Hello again, Year 7s. Welcome back to Term 2, Week 1. So this is the PowerPoint lecture covering all of our work and content for the first week of Term 2. You can see our topic is the Australian Government, Federation and the Constitution. These are the topics we are going to cover in detail this week as we prepare for our new civics topic. So for each of the weeks, I've created a PowerPoint. We have a series of tasks to complete here, and then you have a series of checkpoints or things that need to be submitted just to keep everyone on track and accountable. So this week, the task that you need to complete, the first and most important thing is that you need to submit your geographical inquiry investigating the livability of your neighbourhood. That needs to be submitted by 5 p.m. on Friday, the 1st of May, via the submissions portal on Connect. You have been working on this since the end of last term. Please check the task sheet to ensure you have everything ready to be submitted. The other tasks that you need to complete are listed in the suggested completion order. So I would get your inquiry submitted, get it handed in, and you can focus on the next few weeks worth of work. However, I understand everyone's circumstances are different. Maybe you've got a big chunk of time that you'd like to dedicate to HASS. Maybe you've got to break it up into smaller tasks. So the first task is submit your inquiry. Then you need to work through the activities in this PowerPoint. You need to complete the closed notes, which you can download from Connect. They look like this. Here's my copy that I've started filling in preparation for this lesson. There is a quiz to complete about Federation and the Australian Government and democracy. And the final submission is you need to create a word cloud based on democracy, government, civics-based words. Please see my example on the Connect discussion page. So we've got 3 checkpoints that we need to meet this week. First one, submitting your inquiry. Second one, forms quiz. Third one, democracy word cloud. So please make sure you've completed all of those things by the end of the first week. So let's get started. So the PowerPoint presentation, the lecture, make sure you've got the close worksheet, filling in the blanks as you go and completing any of the activities. The first task is an introduction activity, so sketching your understanding of Federation and the Constitution. So you can pause the video now and fill in what you think those words might mean. Okay, our next task is there's 2 videos from the Parliamentary Education Office for you to watch. The first one is about Federation and the second one is about the Constitution. So for each of these clips, you are answering the questions, why did people in the Australian colonies want to join together to form a nation in the first place? Why was the Constitution written? And what happened in 1901? So watching the video clips, please, answering the questions in the table. Okay, so now you have watched the videos, Year 7s. Just to check you've got the correct answers, why did people in the Australian colonies want to join together to form a federation? The first main reason was defence. They felt they were stronger if they were united together, so it was safer. They wanted to make it easier to run the country, so stop having different taxes for people, different railway gauges, just basically make Australia an easier place to live in. The colony would work better. And also many of them felt that they had quite a lot in common, that they had this new sense of Australian identity. Why was the Constitution written? Because it was to set out how the new nation would run. It's a guidebook, or it sets the rules for how the country is going to function. It tells everybody what they can and can't do. And what happened in 1901? On the 1st of January 1901, Australia became a federation. The Commonwealth of Australia was born, and later in that year, after everyone had celebrated, the first federal parliament met in Melbourne. So if you need to add anything to your table, please do so now. Okay, so turning on to page 2, the close activity. So the formal name for Australia is the Commonwealth of Australia. filling in that first gap, please. Okay, year sevens. The question we're answering now is, what was Australia like before Federation? In 1901, Australia was a series of separate British colonies, each functioning like their own small country, founded at different times from 1788 with New South Wales and the First Fleet, all the way up until the late 1890s. Western Australia itself was founded in 1829. So the concept of one Australian nation didn't exist yet. You can see with this diagram here on the PowerPoint slide how the Australian state and territory boundaries and borders have evolved over time. So it starts off with just New South Wales, very quickly adding in Victoria and Tasmania and Western Australia, and you'll note that the ACT and the Northern Territory didn't exist during this time. So the words that we're looking for are in 1901, British colonies and separate countries. Australia as one nation didn't exist yet. So Federation was the 1st of January 1901, please remember that date, and we had the 6 self-governing colonies which now form 6 of our states here in Australia. So Australia was a very divided place before 1901. Victoria was a very self-sufficient colony. They're saying we look after ourselves. There's always that rivalry between New South Wales and Victoria, both claiming to be the better thing. A lot of people didn't even appreciate Tasmania, often gets forgotten and left off maps, which makes them very angry. Queensland was very much doing its own thing. It had very different conditions. And Western Australia, keeping the best resources, they also wanted to become their own country, which is called secession. So what was Federation and who wanted it? So Federation is when the independent colonies come together to form the single nation, the Commonwealth of Australia. And I like to think of it, two hands coming together, clasping, that is Federation, coming together, unity, joining. So we had a population of just under 4 million people. To put that into context, we've got about 25 million people living in Australia today. A lot of people came from European, British backgrounds, meaning that they had been coming from overseas first. However, by the time people started talking about Federation, a lot of people called native born. So they were born in Australia rather than coming from overseas. And these people wanted to explore this concept of being Australian. So the words that we need to be writing in our close notes are Federation, population, here, states, ACT, 100 years, European backgrounds, and Australian. Can't quite make that on my screen. Okay, so add those to your notes now. The road to Federation was definitely a rocky one. Henry Parkes is the first name that you need to write down. He is often called the father of Federation. He was the colonial secretary, and it was very much his idea and him pushing Federation forward to make it happen. He was the colonial secretary of New South Wales, and as early as 1867, he was proposing the idea of a federation. However, the British colonies said no. They did not want Australia to be independently separate. Luckily, Henry did not give up, and he was getting older, and his beard was getting longer. He was the Premier of New South Wales 5 times, so the leader of the New South Wales state government, and he brought up the idea of federation again in 1880. He's been kicking around his mind for a while, and then he brings it up again in 1880. So there were quite a few worries. There was initial resistance to this idea of federation. The states were pretty concerned about different things. The first one was communication. So please add this to your table of reasons for and against federation, that communication was a big issue. And then also, who was going to pay for everything? States were very, very worried about economics. People were also worried about immigrant labour and they wanted some form of immigrant control. The main reason why states didn't want to federate is they didn't want to share. They didn't want to share power and wealth. There was a couple more worries as well. So there's often lots of reasons not to do something scary like federation. They were worried about workers forming unions. They wanted to make sure that taxes were the same, but they didn't want their businesses to suffer. And they were concerned about defence. So pause the video here, please, Year 7s. Have a look at the reasons for and against federation. I want you to pick the best 3 reasons for and 3 reasons against federation and write them in the table on your worksheet, please. Okay, the path to federation was definitely not a smooth one because of the fears that the states had that there would be, they'd lose all their power and all their money and their influence. There was a Federal Council of Australasia founded. They met several times to try and nut out the details of federation. Interestingly, New Zealand was asked if they'd like to join the federation too, as was Fiji, and they said, no, thank you very much. So that's what the political cartoon is here, a picture of federated Australia and New Zealand riding on the kangaroo's tail. Once they had decided we do want to federate, the next question for these representatives is what kind of government do we want to have? So before we move on, the words that we need to be writing in our notes are Australasia, colonies, several, New Zealand, and America. So please add these words to your notes now. So the Australians were in a very unique position because they were deciding democratically what kind of government they could create, this brand new nation, this unique opportunity. They looked to 2 countries for inspiration and guidance. The first one was the British system, obvious reasons, the British colonising Australia and using a lot of their laws and systems. The second one was the American model. So we can see this in our political system today, that the British system is split between 2 houses. It has an upper house and a lower house. And it was very useful because we still have the Queen as the monarch. We have a constitutional monarchy here in Australia. The American model mixed in slightly more democratic rather than the House of Lords being elected based on blood or land ownership. These people in the upper house were elected rather than just being born into that. Once they had all of this sorted, they needed to get the Australian people on board. White Australians anyway, because the vote had not been extended by that point to non-white Australians or even women. So they had to have a referendum. So please write down the word referendum. It's a very important word for us to know in Year 7 civics. It's a poll in which citizens of a country make a major change. It can also change the constitution in Australia, and it's the only way to do that. So the citizens of Australia were asked, do you want to federate? And in 1898 here, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania and South Australia voted to become part of the Federation. They voted again in 1899 and Queensland joined them. Interestingly enough, it wasn't until 1900 that Western Australia voted to join the Federation. In fact, WA was added to the legal federal documents that Queen Victoria signed after she signed them. We were a bit slow on the uptake here in Western Australia. We weren't sure if we wanted to join or not. And in 1901, Australia was created. So we're quite a young nation. Australia celebrated federation in a multitude of ways. The first picture here is a West Australian keeping a record of which areas in Western Australia voted yes and no. The thing I've picked for this one is if you look at the date here, the 31st of July 1900, it's less than 6 months until the Federation actually happens. The second picture is a picture of Centennial Park in Sydney, very famous Federation Dome that was built, and you can see all the people coming out for a picnic in all their finery. And the last picture, very popular pastime in 1901, was a maypole. So, always good HASS knowledge to know the name of the first Prime Minister of this country. So writing down his name, please. He was Sir Edmund Barton. He was the Prime Minister from 1901 to 1903. The last thing that we need to do is we need to remember that Australia has 3 levels of government. So please write down 3. We have federal, state and local, and they each look after different things. The federal parliament is located in Canberra and it's led by the Prime Minister. Our current Prime Minister, perhaps you've seen him on the news recently, is Scott Morrison. Please write his whole name. His name is not ScoMo. So please make sure you've got federal, state and local in your pyramid there. So the mapping activity now, you need to, with a big red dot, locate Canberra, capital city of Australia, and label the ACT, the Australian Capital Territory. So created to be 100 miles from Sydney and from Melbourne, because neither capital city could agree on who would become the new capital, so they had to create one in the middle. So can you pause your video here and complete the mapping activity on the bottom of page 4. Picture of Canberra, Parliament House. Okay, Constitution. What do we know about it? It's the set of rules and laws that govern our country. There's 8 chapters. Why do we have one? So we can run the country. It was written in the late 1890s, but was created on the 1st of January 1901. And what does it do? It sets out how the government runs. Who can do what your job is, how you create new states, all things like that, which you can see in this slide here. So the chapter 1 tells you how the parliament is run, what powers they have. The second chapter talks about the role of the GG, or the Governor General. The third chapter talks about how the court system, or the judiciary, functions. The fourth chapter talks about the economy, who can set laws in regards to the economy. Chapter 5 deals with the states, and Chapter 6 deals with the creation of new states, how you make that. Chapter 7 deals with the location of Canberra, the capital city, and Chapter 8 explains how you change the constitution, which is via a referendum. Okay, our last activity today is using emojis. You can use the ones here, or if you know some different ones, you can use them too. I would like you to summarise what you have learnt in today's lesson with a sentence underneath explaining your choices. Before you go, a piece of interesting historical information for you here. Once we had federated, we'd come together as one country, the Commonwealth of Australia, we had to create a new flag for the whole country. So in 1901, there was a competition. It was run by a newspaper in Melbourne, and it gave a prize of £25, which in today's money is about $37,000, to create, design, make a flag that would represent Australia. So you can imagine the one we end up with, the Union Jack and the Federation Star and the Southern Cross. But there was a few interesting entries that didn't quite make the cut, and this was one of them. So we've got a series of emus and kangaroos running across the country. This could have almost been the flag that represents our country. So finish the conclusion activity, make sure your closed notes are finished, and then head back to your task checklist to make sure you finished everything for this week. Okay, thank you.